Okay, so there's been a lot of discourse around remakes lately, and for basically no reason. Video game remakes, I just specify, even though you're watching a guy who normally talks about video games, but whatever. Some people are tired of remakes, some people just want old games to be more readily available on modern platforms. Some people think remakes are outright pointless. Video games are definitely different from other forms of media. A lot of movie remakes feel kind of pointless to me. Like, why remake so many Disney movies in live action when there's nothing wrong with the originals? Albeit it might be because coming up with new ideas that will do well is difficult, but that's probably besides the point. Probably. I think a lot of this started up again with the new Silent Hill 2 remake, which is apparently really good to everyone's surprise. But everyone was so ready to dogpile on this thing for so long that some fans are pissed that it's actually good. But I don't know enough about Silent Hill to really go into it beyond that. Konami in recent years has been criticized for only releasing remasters and remakes instead of new games, but I think it's to rebuild their public image and build up new talent. Like, since the Silent Hill 2 remake turned out so well, its developers can probably take up the reins to make a new game. That's kind of what happened with Metroid. Mercury Steam remade Metroid 2, which led to them making Metroid Dread, one of the best games in the series. A lot of people were skeptical about Samus Returns because of their track record of making blah Castlevania games, but now Dread exists, so it's pretty hard to complain. Honestly, even if the remake doesn't add many meaningful improvements, it's just cool to see it reimagined with newer technology. Like, Metroid Prime Remastered isn't really that big of an improvement over the Wii version for me, but seeing it look this good is just really cool. Everyone seems to forget how new of a medium video games are. In previous generations, just a few years meant massive leaps in what could be done. Like, the Dreamcast was only 3 years after the N64. Sonic Adventure was only 3 years after Mario 64. The reason why so many movie remakes feel pointless is because the fundamentals of how to make a good movie haven't changed much since the original movie. People have different expectations for games now than they did 20 years ago. A game released today is fundamentally different than a game released on the Atari. When I review games, for the most part, I try my best to use the release of the game that people are most likely going to play. It's obviously a bit of a loose rule. With Pokemon, I'm sticking to the originals because I want those videos to be more of a retrospective on how the series evolved over time. But with something like Halo, I'd probably just play the Master Chief Collection on PC. Now that it's a series I'm even thinking about covering, I don't feel qualified to talk about those games in depth. But as a casual enjoyer of the series, it's the most convenient way to play them, so why wouldn't I play this version of the game? Pokemon is actually a good talking point with the remakes. Pokemon remakes update the mechanics of the originals while keeping the design ethos the series had at the time. Fire Red and Leaf Green are often criticized for not changing enough, but considering how solid the game design already was in the original, aside from battle mechanics, they didn't really need to change much about it. But Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are also criticized for not changing enough about the originals, but that's because they based off Diamond and Pearl and pretended that Platinum didn't exist despite clearly being the more polished experience, but I'm not getting into a whole rant about that. Remakes definitely need developers to understand all the nuances of the original, so they know what kind of changes would be good to make. Even just a graphical overhaul like Metroid Prime Remastered takes a lot of knowledge about the original to understand why everything looked the way it did, and to update the visuals without feeling like a different game. It's probably easier than making a new game, but it's still not easy. You can't please everyone with the remakes. Either you change a lot and alienate old fans who like all the weird quirks of the original, or you barely change anything and risk not being able to meaningfully improve the game. Being able to improve a past work is absolutely a big advantage of the medium. Games are art, sure, but they're also software, and you can improve software in objectively good ways. Like, if you can add widescreen support and uncap the frame rate, why wouldn't you want to do that? If you can make the controls more responsive and more comfortable to most people, why wouldn't you want to do that? It's obviously a case-by-case basis, but it's definitely a change that doesn't impact anyone if you make them optional. Like being able to play in the original resolution and aspect ratio and using the original controls. I don't know who in their right mind would play with the GameCube controls in Prime Remastered, but there's nothing stopping you from experiencing how it was played when it first came out. Croc is apparently getting a remaster that introduces modern controls, but it still lets you play with the original tank controls. Making a game more enjoyable to most people is an objectively good thing. Although games should also be available in their original forms too. Like, I completely agree on that. The Crash and Spyro remake trilogies are fantastic, but you should still be able to play the PS1 versions in some form. There's absolutely a certain charm in playing the game how it was originally. If you want to play Silent Hill 2 on modern systems, the only officially available version version is the remake. You can't play the original game very easily anymore, at least not without going through hoops with emulators or mods for the original PC release. Ironically, Konami did this right with Metal Gear Solid 3. That's getting a remake, but you can also play the original game on the same systems. Now, the Master Collection sucked when it first came out, but the PC version just got an update to let you play with an uncapped resolution, so I'd imagine that the PS5 and Series X versions will let you play it higher than 720p soon. And at that point, these games are in a good enough state where you can play them and enjoy them without much issue. Part of the problem is probably that games are so hard to preserve. In a worst case scenario, you can take out your phone and start recording the screen when you're watching a movie or a TV show. You can write down a book word for word into a text document. You can take a picture of a painting. You can't just take a game, plop it onto a different device and expect it to work. Video games are software, and that's not how software works. You can write more software to get this old software to think it's running on what it was supposed to be running on, but that takes a lot more work than just ripping a DVD, for example. Ultimately, I don't think remake discourse is going to go away anytime soon, because it highlights an impossible problem. How can we get nearly every popular game to work on modern hardware legally? You can't. Even if it was possible, it would take such an astronomical amount of work that most companies won't bother, especially if all that work goes down the drain if backwards compatibility breaks on the next consoles. Hopefully PS6 still plays PS4 games. Hopefully Switch 2 still plays Switch 1 games. Hopefully Xbox Series Z Kai still plays Xbox One games and most popular 360 games. But we can't know for sure, and who knows when they have to stop supporting older compatibility. It's probably going to happen eventually. So remakes and remasters have to keep happening, or else old games are going to be lost to time. Sure, I'd like to have both the remakes and the originals on the same hardware, but I feel that being able to play the game in some form is better than not being able to play it at all. Now, obviously, emulators are always going to exist, and they're going to be an increasingly attractive way to play old stuff, but remakes and remasters show there's a market for people that just don't want to mess with them, and that's fine too. And like, even me, like, I play stuff on emulators all the time, but like, if there's an official way to play the game, most of the time I'd rather just do that because it's easier. I don't know, that's probably all I've got to say about this, so it's been fun. Take care, everyone.